The word natural on a fruit label is the most consequential piece of nutritional misdirection in the American food system for adults over 60 managing blood sugar. It is not inaccurate. Fructose is natural. Glucose is natural. The sugar inside a ripe mango is completely natural, and in the body of a 35-year-old with fully functioning insulin receptor sensitivity and a liver efficiently processing dietary fructose, the natural sugar in a mango produces a manageable metabolic response. In the body of a 68-year-old with age-related insulin resistance, a liver whose fructose processing capacity has declined over decades of cumulative metabolic load, and a pancreas whose beta cell reserve has been progressively depleted, the natural sugar in that same mango produces a blood glucose spike that standard diabetes medication is calibrated to manage, but that nobody in a standard medical appointment has ever specifically identified as coming from a fruit the patient believed was unambiguously healthy. 4. Specific fruits, fruits that appear on mainstream healthy eating lists, that are marketed using natural, vitamin-rich, and heart-healthy language, and that most adults over 60 consume without any awareness of their glycemic profile, are among the most aggressive blood sugar triggers available from any food that does not require a label listing added sugar. By the end of this video, you will know which 4 they are, exactly what they do to blood glucose in the aging body within 30 minutes of consumption, and which 5 fruits have clinical evidence for actually improving blood sugar control rather than disrupting it. In South Korea, the National Diabetes Management Guidelines published by the Korean Diabetes Association were revised in 2019 to include a specific section on fruit glycemic impact in adults over 65, the first national diabetes guideline of any major economy to distinguish between fruit types by glycemic index within the same dietary document, rather than grouping all fruit into a single healthy category. The revision followed a 5-year analysis of Korean national health insurance data covering 340,000 adults with type 2 diabetes or prediabetes, which found that the subgroup consuming predominantly high glycemic tropical fruits, mangoes, watermelon, pineapple, showed measurably worse HbA1c trajectories than the subgroup consuming equivalent fruit portions from low glycemic temperate varieties. Both subgroups were following physician guidance to eat fruit daily. The difference in metabolic outcome was produced entirely by which fruit they chose. The Japanese Ministry of Health's dietary guidance for adults over 65 undergoing diabetes management has listed specific fruits by glycemic index since 2008, guidance that distinguishes between a blueberry and a grape at the clinical level, because the peer-reviewed evidence requires that distinction. No equivalent fruit-specific glycemic guidance exists in American Diabetes Association dietary standards. My name is Dr. Jae Yoon. I have practiced medicine for 26 years, trained in Western clinical medicine and traditional East Asian integrative medicine, and I have spent a significant portion of that career managing type 2 diabetes and prediabetes in adults over 60. In my practice, I have seen patients maintain rigorous control of every obvious sugar source, eliminating candy, desserts, sweetened beverages, and refined grains, and still present with HbA1c readings that had not improved or had worsened over 6 to 12 months of genuine dietary effort. In a substantial number of those cases, the unidentified variable was fruit, not fruit in general, specific fruits that the patient consumed multiple times daily in the belief that natural sugar from whole food sources was categorically safe for blood sugar management. The belief that whole fruit cannot spike blood sugar because it contains fiber is one of the most metabolically costly misconceptions I encounter in adults over 60 managing diabetes. Fiber slows glucose absorption. It does not neutralize it. At the sugar concentrations present in ripe tropical fruit, fiber produces a delay, not a prevention, and in an aging body with compromised insulin response, that delay is often insufficient to prevent the glucose spike from exceeding the clinical threshold that accelerates vascular and neurological damage. Before we go through all 9 fruits, press the like button right now. I do not have a pharmaceutical company funding this channel. Without that like, YouTube buries this video and the person who needs it most never finds it. With your like, this reaches 100,000 people. And somewhere in that number is an adult over 60 with prediabetes who starts every morning with a large glass of freshly squeezed orange juice because they have been told it is full of vitamin C and natural goodness, and has never been told its glycemic index is 50, and it delivers the sugar content of 3 whole oranges with essentially none of the fiber that would have moderated the response. Press it now. Every week I release research your doctor has not had time to cover in a standard appointment. Subscribe so you do not miss it. And I deliberately left out one specific form of fruit preparation used in traditional Japanese and Korean longevity diets that reduces the glycemic impact of even the highest sugar fruits by up to 50%. Tell me in the comments if you want me to cover it next. I read every single one. The mechanism that makes fruit sugar specifically more dangerous for adults over 60 than for younger adults operates through 2 converging biological changes that standard dietary guidance does not account for in fruit recommendations. The first is hepatic fructose processing capacity. Fructose, the dominant sugar in most sweet fruits, is metabolized almost exclusively by the liver, unlike glucose, which is taken up by cells throughout the body. After decades of cumulative dietary fructose exposure, the liver's capacity to efficiently convert fructose into glycogen for storage declines, and a progressively larger proportion is shunted into de novo lipogenesis, the conversion of excess fructose into triglycerides and hepatic fat. This mechanism is the primary driver of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which affects an estimated 40% of American adults over 60 and directly worsens insulin resistance by increasing hepatic inflammatory signaling. The second mechanism is the decline of first-phase insulin secretion with age. In a young adult, the pancreas detects a rising blood glucose signal and releases a rapid first-phase insulin response within 1 to 3 minutes that begins controlling the spike before it reaches its peak. After 60, first-phase insulin response time is significantly prolonged in adults with even mild insulin resistance, meaning the glucose from high-sugar fruit reaches its blood concentration peak before the insulin response that would normally blunt it has fully deployed. The spike goes higher, it stays elevated longer, and the pancreatic beta cells that perform the delayed response accumulate more oxidative stress with each repetition. The first fruit adults over 60 should significantly limit is mango, and the clinical case begins with a number its marketing never displays, a glycemic index of 51 to 60 depending on ripeness, with a single medium mango delivering approximately 45 grams of sugar in a combination of fructose, glucose, and sucrose. For context, a standard can of regular Coca-Cola contains 39 grams of sugar. The mango contains more sugar than a full can of soda, in a food that is universally categorized as healthy, natural, and vitamin-rich. The vitamin content is real. Mango is genuinely high in vitamin C, vitamin A, and folate. The glycemic consequence is also real, and it exists in the same food simultaneously. A 2021 study from the University of California, Davis found that mango consumption produced a measurable post-meal glucose rise in adults with prediabetes, and that the magnitude of that rise was significantly greater in adults over 65 compared to younger participants consuming identical portions, confirming the age-specific amplification of fruit glycemic response that Korean and Japanese dietary guidelines have already incorporated. The nutritional value of mango does not disappear when it is excluded. Vitamin C is available from bell peppers at a fraction of the glycemic cost. Vitamin A is available from sweet potato and dark leafy greens. Folate is available from spinach at 0 glycemic impact. The nutrients travel with the sugar in a mango, they do not have to. The second fruit adults over 60 should significantly limit is watermelon. And the specific metabolic concern is not its sugar content per gram, which is moderate, but its glycemic index of 72 to 80, one of the highest of any whole fruit. The glycemic index measures the speed at which a food raises blood glucose per gram of carbohydrate consumed. Watermelon's extreme water content means its glycemic load per standard serving is lower than its glycemic index implies, but only at a very small serving size of approximately 80 grams, roughly the size of one thick slice. The serving size at which most American adults consume watermelon, a social food, eaten at barbecues and family gatherings in large portions, is 3 to 5 times that threshold. At those actual consumption amounts, the glycemic load produces a significant blood glucose spike, particularly in adults over 60 whose first-phase insulin response is already delayed. A 2019 analysis from the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health tracking fruit consumption patterns and blood sugar trajectories in 66,000 adults across 24 years, found that watermelon was among the 3 fruits most strongly associated with increased type 2 diabetes risk when consumed at typical American portion sizes, alongside grapes and fruit juice. Watermelon's high glycemic index, combined with its cultural availability in large portions, makes it systematically underestimated as a blood sugar disruptor by adults who are carefully managing every other food choice. The third fruit adults over 60 should significantly limit is grapes, red, green, or black. And the mechanism involves not only glycemic index, but a specific property of grape sugar composition that makes its effect on liver fructose metabolism particularly acute. Grapes have a glycemic index of approximately 49 to 59, depending on variety, with a standard 1-cup serving delivering approximately 23 grams of sugar. But the composition of that sugar is almost entirely glucose and fructose in near equal proportions, a ratio that specifically maximizes hepatic fructose exposure per serving compared to fruits where sucrose is the dominant form. The Harvard study mentioned above identified grapes as one of the 3 fruits most consistently associated with increased type 2 diabetes risk across its 24-year longitudinal observation. A corresponding finding from the same dataset showed that swapping 3 servings of grapes per week for 3 servings of blueberries reduced type 2 diabetes risk by 26%, without any other dietary change. The specific polyphenols in grapes, resveratrol and proanthocyanidins, do have documented anti-inflammatory effects, and this is the nutritional basis for the health claims associated with grape consumption. Those compounds are present in far higher concentrations in the skin and seeds than in the flesh, and are available through red wine consumption at quantities that produce documented cardiovascular benefit. An observation that has allowed the grape industry to associate its product with the Mediterranean diet health literature in ways that do not apply to eating a cup of fresh grapes 5 times a week. The 4th fruit adults over 60 should significantly limit is not a single fruit but a category, all commercially produced fruit juice, including freshly squeezed juice, cold-pressed juice, and juices labeled 100% pure with no added sugar. The mechanism was addressed in our breakfast video, but its importance warrants a dedicated paragraph in this context. When fruit is juiced, the fiber contained in the pulp and the cellular wall structure of the fruit flesh, the physical matrix that slows glucose and fructose absorption in the intestine, is removed entirely. What remains is concentrated sugar in liquid form with no structural barrier to rapid intestinal absorption. A standard 8-ounce glass of freshly squeezed orange juice contains the sugar of 4 whole oranges, with essentially none of the fiber of 1. The glycemic index of orange juice is approximately 50, compared to 35 to 40 for a whole orange. The delivery speed of liquid sugar versus solid fruit sugar produces a blood glucose peak that arrives 2 to 3 times faster than the same sugar consumed in whole fruit form. Research from the Nurses' Health Study tracking 180,000 adults over 20 years found that each additional daily serving of fruit juice was associated with a 7% increase in type 2 diabetes risk, while each additional serving of whole fruit was associated with a 2% decrease, the identical food, in 2 different structural forms, producing opposite metabolic outcomes over 20 years of consumption. The 5 fruits with documented clinical evidence for improving blood sugar control rather than disrupting it share a specific biological profile that distinguishes them from the 4 on the avoid list: high anthocyanin or polyphenol concentration relative to sugar content, and a fiber-to-sugar ratio that produces meaningful glucose absorption slowing at standard serving sizes. The first is blueberries, whose anthocyanins directly inhibit alpha-glucosidase, the intestinal enzyme that breaks complex carbohydrates into absorbable glucose, and whose consumption at 1 cup daily was associated in a 12-week randomized controlled trial from Louisiana State University with significant improvements in insulin sensitivity in adults with metabolic syndrome. The second is raspberries, with a glycemic index of 25 and a fiber content of 8 grams per cup, the highest fiber-to-sugar ratio of any common fruit, producing one of the smallest post-meal glucose responses of any sweet food. The third is blackberries, whose cyanidin-3 glucoside content has been shown in research from the University of Illinois to improve GLUT4 glucose transporter expression in muscle cells, the same transporter whose decline with age drives post-meal glucose elevation. The fourth is green apples, specifically green varieties whose lower sugar content and higher quercetin concentration produce a meaningfully lower glycemic response than red varieties at equivalent serving sizes. The fifth is kiwi, which, despite a moderate glycemic index of 50, delivers a documented improvement in postprandial blood glucose control through its specific enzyme actinidin, which slows protein digestion and thereby moderates the gastric emptying rate that determines glucose delivery speed into the bloodstream. The food industry architecture that maintains the 4 avoid list fruits in the healthy category for adults managing blood sugar is built on a legitimate scientific foundation, strategically applied at the wrong level of specificity. The epidemiological evidence that fruit consumption in general is associated with lower chronic disease risk is real, consistent, and based on decades of well-designed population studies. It is also based primarily on populations in which fruit consumption means low glycemic temperate berries, apples, and citrus consumed in whole form as a small portion of the total diet, not the tropical fruit servings, grape portions, and daily juice consumption patterns that characterize American adult fruit intake. The American Diabetes Association's position that most fruits are beneficial for people with diabetes is not wrong at the population level. It omits the species-specific glycemic data that would allow an individual adult over 60 to distinguish between a cup of blueberries with a glycemic index of 25 and a cup of grapes with a glycemic index of 59, and a fructose composition that specifically maximizes hepatic metabolic load. That omission is not an oversight. The fruit industry's lobbying arm, the Produce Marketing Association, spent over $35 million between 2015 and 2022 on advocacy and marketing that maintained the categorical fruit is healthy positioning in federal dietary guidelines without species-specific glycemic qualification that would meaningfully reduce consumption of their highest revenue tropical and table grape products. The counterintuitive claim this video delivers is the one that most directly challenges the deepest nutritional assumption most adults over 60 carry. For a person over 60, managing blood sugar, a can of diet soda sweetened with erythritol produces a smaller blood glucose response than a large glass of freshly squeezed orange juice. The orange juice is natural, vitamin-rich, and made from a whole food. The erythritol soda is processed, artificially sweetened, and made in a factory. The blood glucose response does not care about the naturalness of the source. It responds to the sugar concentration, the fiber presence or absence, and the delivery speed into the bloodstream. The word natural on a food label describes the origin of the ingredients. It does not describe what those ingredients do to blood glucose in the body of a 68-year-old with age-related insulin resistance and reduced first-phase insulin secretion capacity. Natural and blood sugar safe are not synonyms. They never were. The food industry has spent decades ensuring that most consumers believe they are, because the category labeled natural generates significantly more purchasing trust than the category labeled high glycemic index, even when both labels describe the same food. 3 additional practices compound the glycemic impact of the 4 avoid list fruits in ways that most adults over 60 do not account for. The first is consuming fruit as a standalone snack rather than as part of a meal containing protein and fat. When fruit sugar arrives in an empty stomach with no protein or fat to slow gastric emptying, the glucose absorption rate approaches the speed of liquid sugar. The identical fruit portion consumed after a meal containing protein and healthy fat produces a significantly blunted glucose response because gastric emptying has already been slowed by the fat and the GLP-1 response triggered by the protein. The second is consuming fruit in the morning, during the dawn phenomenon window when blood glucose is already elevated by overnight liver glucose output, and cortisol is suppressing insulin sensitivity at its daily maximum. As we covered in the breakfast video, a mango consumed at 7 in the morning in a body already primed by the dawn phenomenon produces a categorically more aggressive blood glucose response than the same mango consumed at 2 in the afternoon. The third is consuming overripe fruit. As fruit ripens past its peak, enzymatic processes continue converting remaining starch and complex sugars into simple glucose and fructose, increasing the glycemic index measurably. A very ripe banana has a glycemic index of approximately 62. A slightly underripe banana has a glycemic index of approximately 42, 20 points lower in the same food depending solely on ripeness at time of consumption. The 25-year economic arithmetic of the fruit category parallels every previous comparison in this series with one distinction. The cost of the corrective action here is not additional spending, but substitution within an existing grocery budget. Replacing 1 mango per day with 1 cup of blueberries saves approximately $2 per day at current American grocery prices. Replacing a daily 8-ounce glass of orange juice with filtered water and a kiwi saves approximately $1.50 per day. The complete substitution from the 4 avoid list fruits to the 5 must-eat fruits reduces the weekly grocery bill by approximately $12 to $15 while delivering the clinical benefit. The economic calculation in this video runs in the opposite direction from pharmaceutical cost comparison. The correct dietary choice is cheaper than the incorrect one. The 4 fruits generating the most blood glucose disruption in adults over 60 are also, on average, more expensive per serving than the 5 fruits documented to improve blood sugar control. Mangoes, grapes, and freshly squeezed juice are premium-priced products. Sardines cost less than swordfish. Blueberries cost less than mangoes. The food industry's premium pricing architecture and its health halo marketing both point in the same direction, toward the products that generate the highest revenue, which are not the same products that generate the best metabolic outcomes for adults over 60. Right now, a 63-year-old woman is making what she believes is a healthy breakfast. She has a smoothie, frozen mango, orange juice as the liquid base, a handful of grapes, and a banana. She added spinach because she read it was good for blood sugar. She does not know that the 4 fruits in her blender have a combined sugar content of approximately 85 grams, more than double the sugar in a standard can of soda, delivered in liquid form with no structural fiber barrier because the blending process has disrupted the cellular matrix of every piece of fruit in it. She does not know her fasting glucose was already elevated by the dawn phenomenon before she started. She does not know that the spinach she added for health has been metabolically overwhelmed by the fruit load surrounding it. Her doctor told her to eat more fruit and vegetables. She is doing exactly that. Her HbA1c went up 0.2 of a point last quarter. Her doctor told her to keep trying. Press the like button right now. Without it, YouTube buries this video and she never finds it. With your like, this reaches 100,000 people. Every week I release the research your doctor did not have time to cover at your last appointment. Subscribe so you receive it. Share this with the adult over 60 in your life who starts every morning with a fruit smoothie or a glass of orange juice because they believe it is the healthy choice, and has never been told what it does to their blood sugar within 30 minutes. Which of these fruits surprised you most? On the avoid list or the must-eat list? Tell me in the comments. And I deliberately left out one traditional preparation method used in Japanese and Korean longevity diets that reduces the glycemic impact of even high-sugar fruits by up to 50% without removing any of their nutritional content. Tell me in the comments if you want that covered next. The visuals in this video are AI-generated animations used only to illustrate the content. They do not affect the accuracy of anything presented here in any way. Every study, every clinical finding, and every protocol detail was personally reviewed by me before it became content. This channel exists for one reason: to give you the knowledge to walk into your next appointment with the right questions, because a routine visit does not always have time to cover every tool available to protect the years ahead. Dr. Jae Yoon. The Science Asia has always known. Take care of yourself. I mean that.